The word biohacking has been co-opted by lots of different groups. On one extreme of the spectrum, you have people taking 300 different pills a day, vitamins and minerals, prescription drugs bought from questionable labs in India or China. And then on the more conservative side of the spectrum, you have people who are simply measuring things and observing their body, the quantified self movement, their heart rate, their steps per day, their heart rate variability, their blood glucose. They understand how to read their blood panels. They might be tracking their sleep. And most people fall somewhere in the middle. Where do you fall? Well, my suggestion for you is, and for everybody, is to learn more about this amazing thing that is the human body and our mind and how all of it works. We have so much great information. We have access to really cheap sensor technology and relatively inexpensive blood work that it just makes sense to learn more about this vessel that we inhabit and try to figure out how you can optimize for your personal goals. Your goal might be to have greater concentration at work. Your goal might be to live to 122 like my goal is. Your goal might be to lose that 10 extra pounds that you've been carrying around since you hit 40. Whatever it is, if you understand your own biochemistry, if you learn how to read your blood panels, if you understand your heart rate variability and your resting heart rate, and you know some basic things about your body and how it's working, you can make better decisions. I don't recommend buying experimental drugs from questionable labs. I don't recommend carte blanche psychoactive drug therapy and things like this. But I certainly think the more you understand the challenges and the strengths of your own system, the better you can address them. On this week's show, we'll be talking to a self-proclaimed biohacker, someone who does a lot of work with barefoot running and coaching and mind-body work, and specifically with breath work. And I think it'll open up some interesting discussions and some interesting thoughts for you to incorporate into your health journey. Your questions, comments, and feedback are always most welcome. You can contact me, podcast@yogabody.com. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome to the Lucas Rockwood Show. Today's show is called Mental Fitness for the Modern Mind. I'm joined here with Kasper van der Meulen. Kasper is a Wim Hof instructor, a biohacker, a coach, an author, and a speaker. He wrote a book called MindLift, Mental Fitness for the Modern Mind. You can find it on Amazon. You can also find it on his website, mindlift.com. Kasper, welcome to the show.
Thanks for the great introduction. Happy to be here.
So I understand you're a runner. I know that you're doing some barefoot running, some long distance, ultra stuff. Talk to us about how you transitioned into that.
It started out as my main meditation moment in my week. I had a really hard time doing any type of seated meditation practice. Now I've learned that it's, my seated meditation practice, it's kind of the point that it's hard because I'm sitting still and dealing with myself in that state. But in the time when I started running, I was very anxious and I had a lot of time getting my mind right, and I was overweight. I still smoked. I had all these things that were just draining my energy throughout the day. And I figured I should do something, and let's just start simple and get outside and run. And I very quickly noticed that if I'd focus on distance or times or speeds, it would frustrate me. But if I would just take it as my moment with myself, let my mind wander, my body move, and just kind of try to be present in whatever space I was running in, dealing with all the, discomforts that I felt on my body and my mind, protesting and saying, let's just stay on the couch, that kind of stuff. That was really the most useful thing for me. And, through basically doing that more and more regularly, because I just felt my mind and body felt so good if I would run or move at all in that time. That was the only movement I do. I just started doing more and more and started enjoying it and started really loving the feeling of a long distance run. And that's how I got into, more of the ultra distance, or let's say just long distance running. So, more of a mental, emotional, meditative thing for me, definitely, than an athletic thing.
And are you doing some barefoot running? Are you using minimal shoes? What's your preferred footwear?
My favorite thing when it comes to running is running barefoot in the forest. And this is not always an option because I live in the city. So, I like to wear minimal shoes. I have some of those running sandals that I love. I have very basic barefoot style shoes, as they are called. And I have, I just pick out what I used to be very 100% in on the barefoot thing and run barefoot in the city. But now I just pick any tool that is best for me at that moment.
And so what does it look like? Like you're in Holland today, it's probably a rainy day. You're going to go out, it's kind of chilly. What are you going to put on your feet?
On a day like today, I have my favorite running shoe right now is a minimal shoe by New Balance, Minimus. And that's actually probably owned a pair of any version of those that came out. And that is actually the shoe that I wear throughout the day. I have kind of like this policy in my life that I only wear shoes that I could run a marathon in. So I always want to have something that is comfortable, that allows my foot to move naturally. But since I now own a gym where I also do a considerable amount of strength training, more on the strongman style, so a lot of heavy carrying, and when doing heavy carries like with a sandbag or a yoke outside, it is nice to have a little bit of cushioning, otherwise you're just grinding your feet into pavement. So I wear those, but I must say that on days like these where it's almost freezing and it's kind of rainy, I actually do kind of love taking my bike out, keeping my shoes on, taking my bike out to whatever, a lake or a bit of nature that I can find where I can run in grass, and then run with my bare feet in the very, very cold grass is something that I love a lot.
And when you started transitioning to more barefoot, more minimal footwear, was that a graceful transition? Did you struggle for a while?
Transition was graceful, but coming to the point of transition was the common running error of, running myself into destruction and then needing to find a different way. And I was wearing all kinds of different shoes with all kinds of different padding. This happens a lot to runners, where one thing that's important to keep in mind is a lot of people, they start running and it's one of the first movement things they do. So their muscular and aerobic development go really fast because muscles and, lungs basically can improve day by day very quickly. But then connective tissue doesn't improve or adapt that quickly. So, you start running and then pretty soon you will have muscles and lungs strong enough to run your connective tissue and your joints and whatever into destruction. And at the beginning, you can kind of get away, if you're not running. In the beginning, I was running like 2K and then 4K. And that was like the first few months. And then you're not, the negative effects of bad form are not that present. And then when I started hurting somewhere, I was just like, let's ask the guy at the running store. And he was like, well, guess what? We have something for that, more expensive running shoes, right? So I actually got a pretty nasty Achilles tendon injury on my most padded shoes that I've ever worn. And then I went to a specialist on running form who did a proper stride analysis and things like that. And he was like, well, you can do two things. I can give you an insole and you'll have to get a new one measured every 6 months, but you can keep running at your own pace. And he said, or you can start walking anew, like learning how to walk completely from the start and learning how to run, minimalist or barefoot style, at least natural running. And it'll take you 6 months to transition, but chances are you'll never need to worry about what kind of shoes you wear again, because you won't really need any. Well, I'll take that one. So I did that. And it took me about 6 months to 8 months. I used cheer running, pose running, all the stuff that's out there. And it's been a game changer.
I'm glad that you brought up the transition period, because a lot of people, whether it's diet or movement, nutrition, whatever it is, they're kind of expecting instant results. And if your whole biomechanical system has adapted to a elevated heel, it's not going to happen overnight where everything's going to suddenly flow. If your whole microbiome has adjusted to a totally processed, whacked out diet, again, same thing if you switch back to nutrition, it's not going to have immediate, in the short term it might be really uncomfortable, but again, it's like, do you want to crutch for the rest of your life, or do you want to spend 6 months going through kind of a rough transition? It's kind of the same with all health transformations and health changes. I know that you've lost a bunch of weight and changed your life pretty dramatically. A bunch of our listeners most of our listeners are really excited and in some process of personal transformation. Can you share a bit of your journey?
In relation to what you just said, I would definitely say look for direct results, but look in a different place, right? So look in the experience. So when people think about results, they think about, how much weight do I lose on the scale within 3 months, or how much weight do I lift on the bar? How much distance do I put on my run in this amount of time? And if you're looking for those kind of results and you're pushing yourself there, it's really easy to either be very disappointed by your results or to, break yourself in the process. the main thing you want to focus on is what is your experience as a human in the moment, right? So if you go for a very slow, very calm run and you've never run before, you can go, oh, I was too slow. I didn't go far enough. I should go faster. My knees hurt. Or you could say, wow, this amazing feeling, this charge in my body, the fresh air coming in and the way my brain and body just feel after a run. That's the thing, the in the moment experience that you can feel direct results on if you are looking for it in that way. And this was also a big game changer in the whole lifestyle change process that I made throughout the years, is more and more looking at how do I modulate my experience in the here and now, and how can I focus on that and then let the results that, like the number on the scale, your beach body look, whatever your goal is, flow from that naturally, because in the moment you're already feeling good. So you have your most important result, which is just having a better day, feeling more awesome in the moment. And then over time, noticing that results naturally flow from there. So yeah, I was about 35 kilos overweight, 80 pounds, but we're both in Europe, so let's keep it metric. And I had smoked for like 12 years. I had shoulder issues, I had knee issues, I had migraines, I had a heart arrhythmia issue that I actually still have, but it was really, really bad at the time. It was exacerbated by, it's actually harmless, but exacerbated by my lifestyle. And I found that I came to a few points of realization along the way where I was like, yeah, this can't be all. I need to change some things. And I went on a search for all the ways that I could do that, always focusing on the mindset and processing the emotional layers first, and then allowing the change to happen from that instead of using hardcore discipline, this external motivation to make a change, but really to look for something deeper within, and then from that, let everything flow.
So I know that you're into Wim Hof breathing. Wim's been on the show. We've had Brian McKenzie on the show. And my listeners, tons of people are into Wim Hof. And it's one of these things that I have kind of mixed feelings about. Such an awesome practice, such an interesting thing. Wim is probably one of the most charismatic breathing teachers ever to live. And I'm a yoga guy, so there's a lot of breathing instructors out there. But unfortunately, Wim, he messes up the science sometimes, and his followers really mess up the science. And there's people dying in pools and doing stupid stuff. And so I really I go back and forth in terms of whether there's a good thing or a bad thing. And I know you're neck deep in this, so I'm sure you've thought through these issues. So how do you kind of justify this world where, every Wim Hof thing I see says don't do this in water. The app says this, and all the online courses that I've done stuff say this, which is great. And then every single Wim Hof practitioner I know is solo practicing, dunking their head in the bath and doing really stupid stuff. And it's not just speculation. People are literally dying. And so how do you think about this in terms of efficacy, safety, responsible use?
Well, the thing is here that you can do anything the wrong way and the right way. I wouldn't agree that Wim messes up the science, but he shines a different light on it. And he's definitely taking the route of science, looking at the studies that are coming out. Even clinical trials that are being done right now, there's a massive amount of interest from the scientific community here, and it is being there's a larger and larger body of well-constructed evidence that is showing the effectivity of this work. And to be fair, there is no other breathing practice that has ever gained this amount of interest from the scientific community, and that has even ventured out to gain that interest, right? So from the start, Wim Hof has always been like, all right, we have to take the scientific route on this. That is one of the reasons so many people are into it. And as far as solo practitioners, all of the solo practitioners I meet practice safely and understand things from the right perspective, practice it from a place of self-expression and self-love, and looking for the experience of health and strength, improving, and not as a performance tool. Now, there are people who get their information from Rig, random internet guy, and just look on YouTube, right? And they feel like, hey, look, here's this cool breath practice. Some guy on YouTube shows it in this way. Some other guy on YouTube shows it that way. And I also saw this other guy doing free diving, and it looks like a very similar thing. Let's do this stuff, right? And this is something that, of course, is a downside of the massive amount of freely available information on the internet, is that people do their own thing. And that I ran my Achilles tendon to shit because I didn't seek out a professional. I was like, it's running, I can do this. And people go, it's breathing, I can do this. But as you know, from a yogic perspective, I mean, there's a good reason as to why breathing teachers are careful with teaching breath, because it's such a powerful tool. And this is why the most important thing is that people, and there's amazing resources out there. By now there are about I think about 300 instructors, or at least I've seen, and I've been a part of the education of about 300 instructors in the Wim Hof Method, and all of them understand that it is a very profound and deep practice that needs to be regarded with reverence. And if you practice safely, it has amazing benefits. And a large part of my job in that field of also training people has always been about finding the right tools of education to present it to people in a way where they understand what the implications are, but they also understand what the health benefits are, and to focus on your current moment experience first. Feel your health, your well-being, your sense of focus improving, and to never use breath as a performance tool. But of course, within the world of breath, you have the areas of yogic breathing and meditation, where breathing is always about self-exploration, self-expression, understanding which state you're in and modulating that. On the other end of the spectrum, you have breathing performance, which is freediving, which I've never gotten into because, it's a very dangerous sport. Just like, jumping out of a plane with a parachute, or it's actually safer, much, much, much safer than freediving, right? So, it's kind of sad that, of course, there's accidents that have happened, and it's very sad that people who are, of course, people that have been in these accidents have had this very enthusiastic response, like, I want to do this, it's awesome, I'm going to, really dive into this. But I definitely, I know that people who approach the method through the right channels and really with the right mindset are safe and are doing it in a way where it helps their life in most ways, and almost every way, if you listen to testimonials, and are not taking any wrong turns on that path.
For people listening, Wim Hof, you can go back and check out the episode. Wim Hof is kind of a controlled hyperventilation with retention practice. Not too dissimilar to like a holotropic breathing, not too dissimilar to something you do in Kundalini, but kind of the pairing of that controlled hyperventilation with the retention is what makes it pretty unique. I guess the reason that I'm always kind of cautioning listeners, because now every time I've been teaching breath for 15 years, but in a very different way. We teach really conservative stuff. But every time I do a breath workshop now, somebody inevitably comes up after and they're like, I love breath, I'm doing Wim Hof. I was like, oh, great. And inevitably they tell me how long they're holding the breath in the bathtub or in the swimming pool. And inevitably, unfortunately, they're doing it by themselves. And this is to be fair, it's not a Wim Hof problem. It's a freediving problem. It's a spearfishing problem. It's really hard to find a buddy who wants to sit next to you and make sure you don't drown when you're practicing for 4-minute retentions, which are really easy, by the way, for people who've never done any of these techniques. And so people do really stupid things. And it's all anybody playing around with water. It's just really difficult to find a buddy who wants to sit next to the pool and make sure you don't have a shallow water blackout.
Well, the thing is, and to me, it's like, why would you even do it in the pool? What's the point? Right? There's absolutely no point to doing it in water. How did that come to life? Right? And of course, Wim also has the freediving record.
Right. That's why.
Which he got using freediving techniques that are made for freediving. And here is a breathing technique that is for promoting health and well-being, living a stronger, happier, healthier life through modulating your nervous system and your immune system to be more resilient to modern life, not to holding your breath underwater, right? So people put two and two together and put themselves in trouble. And this happens everywhere. In all of and I would say even, right? Because I was going to going to have CrossFit as an example. CrossFit is definitely a place where people just ran themselves into the same wall time and time again. There's nothing wrong with CrossFit as a system in a whole. It's the way that people take things and then put themselves in harm's way. And this even happens with yoga, right? Even in the sense that yoga is supposed to be such a conscious, aware practice where you truly look at yourself and find all these modes of regulating yourself within different poses and movement and in your life in general. Beautiful, large philosophy. And still there's people that overdo it and hurt themselves. And this is the same thing that you talked about with transitioning, with nutrition. I mean, people, they read a book or they see a documentary and they go, oh, you know what? I'm overweight. I don't have a lot of energy. This guy on the screen says I should, random example, go fully vegan. And they change their entire life around. And they end up a lot of times in a worse spot. And it's not because there's something wrong with eating a plant-based diet. It is I would say that the modern human approach to wanting to, grab things, crush themselves in it, and take it to a level of performance, use it as self-justification, to take political standpoints. I mean, people need to breathe properly. We need to be mindful of our eating. We need to move. These are things that are so foundational to our being. And in the modern world, there seems to be this paradigm that is a lot of times, compulsive or destructive. And I think that's where a lot of things can, cause more harm than they do good. But it's not necessarily about the method or the technique, but much more about the how and the why that you practice is, and whether you even approach this thing in the correct and safe manner. So, yeah, I'm happy that you're spreading the message of safety and that you're understanding the nuances of, what is the practice really and what is the thing where people approach it. Because, like I said, I never meet people that put themselves in harm's way, because I meet people that come to, workshops and that join retreats and that join the online seminar, and they have questions about, the questions they ask me are not how do I improve my retention time? How do I stay in a cold tub for longer, right? Because those are things that you can't keep progressing on, and they're not actually as interesting as the questions that I get about, how do I deal with my anxiety when I go into meetings on a daily basis? Or they tell me things like, I found that I am much more capable of regulating my energy throughout the day, even though I have, a health condition. And these are the gold nuggets that are really what it is about. And it would be really sad if methods like this, and of course there are many, many great things out there for health, fall to bad light because people take an unsafe route.
It's a really difficult thing, like you mentioned, the Dr. Google, people go and, I guess, another good example is like Dave Asprey, who's really just got amazing information, but your average person, probably 95% of people, they're just like, I will drink coffee. It's a coffee-based butter diet. Off you go. And it's like, wow, there's so, he's doing so much great research and really uncovering really great stuff. And the main takeaway people have is, drink coffee until 3 p.m. and you're good to go. And with Wim, unfortunately, they Google him and they end up seeing some Guinness World Record daredevil stuff. And the next thing you know, they're holding their breath. And it's pretty exciting when you can go from, 1.5 minute retention to 4 to 5 minutes pretty quickly. And people get out of control. But you're right. I mean, it's like anything. People can do stupid things. And when you're playing with something that's as powerful as breath, people can get into trouble pretty fast.
Well, and the same thing is happening if you look at, for example, the world of psychedelics-assisted therapy, which is on the rise.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing thing, and there's people having their lives saved, and kicking addictions and healing from trauma and depression. And then people go like, oh, right, so I should eat a bunch of mushrooms, right? And then my life will be better. I should go to any, self-proclaimed shaman somewhere in the jungle and roll around in the mud while after drinking ayahuasca. There's such a massive surge of people searching for the next step in their life, their next, to shift from wherever they are to something greater. And the modern world has given us a massive array of perspective, of methods, of ideas to actually, come to live in a higher quality of life with higher awareness and higher consciousness. And all these tools that are out there, I mean, it's such an abundance to have this in the modern world. It's absolutely amazing. But also, the fact that they are so available causes people to easily lose track of what it's really about, or to get the feeling that, they are suddenly from one day to the other freed from all of their issues, and they kind of lose themselves in it. And this is definitely a downside that has come with the amazing world of self-development, of biohacking, of health practices. And I see it everywhere I go.
So let's kind of unpack that term. You use the term biohacking and means different things to different people. We live in an information age where, really 20 years ago, there wasn't access to teaching like Wim Hof, like ayahuasca. There wasn't access to all the ayahuasca information, all the psychedelic information, even laws and legality and biochemistry information that you can get from 23andMe. There's a lot of new stuff out there. So when you think about biohacking, how do you define that, and why is that something that interests you?
Well, to me, it is about much more. Well, so biohackers, there's different streams. I mean, there's a transhumanists in biohacking who have this main premise of we should start replacing human functions with technology and integrate and evolve into something newer, higher than human. Not really in that field. And then there's the more technical, technique-based world of biohacking, where it's about what's the next protocol, what's the next supplement, what's the next technology, which is great. It's a great field. A lot of interesting stuff happening. For me, it's more about the philosophical, the more almost like existential look at what does it mean to be a human. And there are so many different ways to look at what it means to be a human, what it is to be a human. And I have found that, so for me, biohacking is the view of being a human of you are a system, all right? So you are a collection of interplaying, interconnected, biological, but also energetic, neurological, psychological systems. And this is what you are as a human, right? And that system, as the way I see it, is basically attempting to survive, to thrive, to figure out how things work. And in my experience, that view is a very pragmatic and a very useful way of looking at life quality in the present moment. So I'm also, I'm interested in the conversation of where is humanity going, what is happening to consciousness, should we integrate technology, and what is the next step in human evolution. But it's very much about, if you look at your day-to-day life and you ask yourself, what is the quality of my day-to-day life, in the sense of how do I enjoy it, how much do I enjoy it, how good do I feel? And then you can look at all these different areas that influence your quality of life. And then if you take this biological systems view, it is, to me, and in the way I kind of practice and study biohacking, it becomes apparent, it becomes clear which things you can actually change and enhance or modulate in order to improve your daily quality of life and to have more conscious awareness of the way in which your system is being influenced by your environment and the way you are constantly responding to your environment through behavior and through action and eventually through results. So if you kind of backtrack that, if you look at the results in your life, then you can ask, all right, so which of my behavior is creating the results in my life, right? Which things in my environment are influencing my ability to change my behavior in a way where I have better results, right? And then you can go and then there's the practical side of all right, so I don't have enough energy in my day. That's what I feel. Cool. Well, there's a ton of ways to do that. And so let's start by looking at sleep. And what I like about it, and then you can, for example, track your sleep and realize hold on, actually, I don't have, I have a very low amount of REM sleep. Oh, and actually that seems to cause brain fog throughout the day. All right, so how do I thought I was just getting dumber. Turns out I'm not getting enough REM sleep. There's something messing with my sleep, and there's all these different ways that I can change it. Right? So am I still making sense? You basically look at the whole system and you get a view. You take what is available in terms of the scientific knowledge of how the human system works and how our system is being misregulated, and then you can start to regulate it again.
I guess I think of it, I guess the story I always tell is, I had this intern come into the office, and she was probably 19, 20 years old, and this was a year ago or so, and she looked around under our big workstation. She's like, what are those black boxes? And I didn't even really understand the question. I was like, you mean the CPUs? And she's like, what's a CPU? She'd only ever had a laptop or a tablet her whole life. And, just a different generation. I'm 40 years old, I know how to take out, RAM and replace hard drives and all this kind of stuff. And when I tell this story to people often say, oh, yeah, who cares? Nobody cares. You don't need to know that information anymore. And I said, I kind of think you do. I spend, 8 or 10 hours a day on a computer. I spend my entire life inside my body. Do you understand how your liver works? Do you understand your microbiome? I kind of think it matters. And I think it's a mistake to not pay attention. Just general mindfulness of the stuff we're interacting with. How does social media work? How does your digestive system work? How do your bowels move? And so when I think of biohacking, I guess I see a lot of people doing shortcuts, which is like pill for an ill, but instead they're trying to use natural stuff for longevity stuff, which is, like you said, interesting. But even more interesting is when you think of biohacking as this mindfulness. Hey, let me understand this black box under my desk. Let me understand this, complicated biology, physiology that makes up myself, and let me understand how the food and the movement and the sleep and all these different patterns are affecting the quality of my life, and hopefully use that mindfulness to make some positive change.
Yeah, let's understand the black box in our head, and I actually teach that in my seminars. I explain the black box principle and the system's view of things, and then I propose a few ways in which we can, create different input for a system, and then use that to learn how that black box works. And before I got into all the lifestyle stuff, and I was still in pretty bad shape myself, I started doing that basically when I was teaching in a school and to kids. I was a science teacher, and I noticed that when it came to learning, that's the first thing I got really excited about developing is ability to learn, because I always thought I had a very low ability to learn. I couldn't sit still, I couldn't concentrate. That's why my book MindLift was primarily about cognitive enhancement and learning and focus. And then a lot of the other lifestyle stuff came up because, it just came up in the research that I was doing, the literature research. But what I started doing is explaining to kids how the brain works, how the brain focuses, which allowed me to explain why it is so difficult for them to focus and to learn, because they're sitting still and because they're asked to sit still and listen for more than an hour. And then I said, well, let's see how we can change this. Let's not sit still during class for more than 10 minutes. Let's not over exceed our ability to focus by simply cutting off lecture time at 15 minutes, right? And then after 15 minutes, we move, or we do a breathing technique, or we do a little bit of meditation before a test. And then, as it seems, and there's actually a brain researcher called Joanne Deek who has done a lot of great work on this, showing that teaching kids how their brains work, just simply adding that layer, like this is why we teach it and how we teach it, because this is how your brain works, creates a massive increase in their ability to learn, but also their joy in learning, because now they're not focusing necessarily on that one grade they're having, that result-based paradigm, but they're looking at how did my brain develop. So that's why, as a teacher, I was kind of like, biohacking my students by taking them into that process. And I definitely feel that we should have a level of, let's say, scientific literacy, as Neil deGrasse Tyson calls it beautifully, that we, build up a vocabulary and a set of understandings that allows us to look within with a bit of a deeper perspective, and not just look at your life and go like, all right, I see all this stuff in my life. I don't know how it got here. I'm not happy with it, and I don't know how to change. Well, let's start by looking at your own system, right? How do you process things? How do you deal with things? How does it work? And also by this time in the modern world, if you want to change the way you eat, if you just start looking at nutrition, there's this massive amount of education available, if you're looking for it, about the gut and the gut-brain link, and about the gut biome, and about the way that every mental state is for such a large part formed by the things you eat. And, the education is out there. So I think one of the things I've been focusing on in my work is going back to that science teacher approach of trying to give people as many tools as possible to start to enjoy the process of figuring out how things work, and from there finding the correct lifestyle intervention for them, instead of following lifestyle intervention marketing or the guru or the next new diet, right? So from a place of understanding how to kind of weed through all these different contradicting, confusing tips and to take a next step. And I think actually, so Dave Asprey has done a massive, he served the world in a big way, because he does absolutely provide the education. Except most people go like, wait, I drink butter and I lose weight. Let's do that all day. And they don't actually go into the education, right? And this is the same thing about Wim Hof. People say like, yeah, he's not really getting the science right. Well, actually he is, but it takes also you to look at it with a bit more time and consciousness and a bit more, of a curious mindset, instead of saying, he said it like this, so it must be like that. Now, how about you, and this is the thing that I find that it's just difficult to get people to that point of thinking for themselves, right? And this is every profound thing that will completely change your life will start, this is my personal opinion, with first taking your own look at it. And what's interesting is that with the availability of information and techniques and knowledge, that means that people have figured out solutions to problems before and are now presenting it in a way that you can use it. This is true. But that doesn't take away that you can also look at the same source that was studied by these people and understand how they came to their techniques and conclusions, and then apply that to your life instead of just looking for the next magic pill.
Kasper, really great information. I know a lot of people will be inspired by your story and your weight loss and your running and everything that you're doing with breath work. For people who would like to check out your book, follow you online, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
So you mentioned my website in the beginning, mindlift.com. That's definitely a place to go. And then there is Instagram, which is my favorite outlet at the moment. And you can find me at Kasper's Focus, KaspersFocus. And that's where I have my most output, so to speak, in content, my daily posts, my stories, where I do Q&As and things like that. So that's just generally the most fun place to follow me.
Kasper, I appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for coming on the show. If you're a yoga teacher, a Pilates teacher, a personal trainer, or if you work one-on-one with clients, I have a 21-day private yoga business accelerator program starting soon. This is actually our third batch of students we've done this year. It's such an elegant program. I'm really excited about it. How it works is you give me 15 minutes every day, and for 21 days, I'll give you an assignment, a very simple assignment to do to move your private yoga teaching business forward. When I first started training teachers back in 2006, I discouraged everyone from teaching privates because it just didn't work. There wasn't a market for it. These days, there's a huge market for it with on-demand service industries like Uber and Airbnb and all the on-demand apps. People are very comfortable hiring private yoga teachers. So it's been really interesting to see the shift where there's actually more yoga happening outside of studios than inside. And we now have graduates and trainees teaching privately in big cities, which are kind of obvious, like London, New York, San Francisco, in medium-sized cities, but also in even towns and even villages. We have people working in towns that are as small as 5,000 people, and they have a healthy private yoga practice. The cool thing about a private yoga business is you usually just need 12 to 15 clients to be full. In my studios, we need hundreds of clients per studio just to keep the lights on. With private yoga, it's much simpler. In any case, if you'd like to learn more, go to myogabusiness.com, myogabusiness.com. This week's nutritional tip is in response to a listener question. It was a generalized question. Should you rinse rice? Should you rinse quinoa? And I'll take the question a little bit even more broad, and the answer is you should clean and wash just about everything that you eat. There are very often salmonella and even E. coli outbreaks, and they're often in vegetable foods because those are wet and damp and things can grow there. And there are also, of course, you do have bacterial infections and things coming from meat and things like this as well. But you want to wash everything. People often forget to wash things like oats, to wash things like rice, and especially to wash things like quinoa. And tea is another one that people never wash. If you've ever been to a tea plantation, a rice field, if you have ever seen these processes, it's just like anything else, right? So rice fields, for example, I've been to in, a whole bunch of different countries, but I'll just give the example of India. I was in India in Kerala, and they were picking basmati rice, and there was a big tarp out on the ground, and they would whack the rice, and the rice they'd gather in a tarp and put it in bags and carry it away. And as soon as I saw that, I realized, wow, this is just like any other food processing. That rice is on the ground. It's on a blue tarp, a plastic tarp. It's dirty and nothing wrong with it, but it needs to be cleaned. And so everyone in Asia washes rice. In the West, people don't often wash rice. You should also rinse your tea. You should also rinse oats or anything like that. With quinoa, it's even more important because they have something called saponins, which are these the thing that makes the bubbles on top, and it can really irritate your stomach. If you rinse it off, oftentimes people digest quinoa much better. You should rinse everything. So how do you do it? Really simply, take your rice, throw it in a pan, fill it up with water, and stick your fingers in there and shake it around, rinse it off a couple of times till the water starts to become more clear. And then from there, you can cook your rice or cook your oats or whatever it is. With tea, the typical way to rinse tea is if you're using like a wire strainer, you do a quick wash. It also rinses away some of the caffeine, which is really great for those of you trying to throttle your caffeine down to 100 milligrams or less per day, which is highly recommended for yoga students. And with quinoa, it's a little bit more tricky because quinoa floats a little bit, but if you let it sit there for a little bit, it'll sink down to the bottom, and you can rinse off a lot of those saponins really easily. So I hope that's helpful for sure. Rinse your oats, rinse your rice, rinse your quinoa, and you should rinse your tea. We have a question from listener Marina this week. Marina says, "Hey Lucas, couple of questions. First one on coconut oil. I'm really confused about whether it's healthy or not for me. I know you recommend it as part of a healthy diet, but Dr. Michael Greger, who's been on your show once and who I greatly respect, he says in relation to arterial health, it's as bad as butter and contributes to insulin resistance. What are your thoughts? Or is moderation the key?" It's a great question, Marina. Coconut oil, there's been a bunch of contrarian research published recently about coconut oil. A lot of it is regurgitation of bad science from the 1980s. Coconut oil is one of the healthier, most cost-effective oils that's available. It's the number one oil I recommend for people to get in their kitchen. If you go to the grocery store, pretty much all the oils, if you're in North America, are bad. They're rancid. They're highly processed PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, that are yellow and beautiful and tasteless, and they last for years because they're rancid before you even got them. You will find some decent olive oil. But coconut oil is one of the least expensive, most versatile oils around, and it's very inexpensive and lots of accessibility. When I first started promoting it 15 years ago, there was actually a US shortage of it. We couldn't even get it in the restaurant. Now it's everywhere. It's really cheap. It's easy to get. It's great for you. All of this research that the vegetarian, vegan, plant-based community cites in terms of arterial health is bad science from the 1970s and 1980s that nobody believes anymore. And they're showing really good science that has been refuted, nobody believes. And unfortunately, Michael Greger is a smart guy, an interesting guy. He's a medical doctor. He's got lots of great research, but unfortunately, he has ideology as well. And ideology and nutrition, they just don't go together. If you have this bias, this idea, this thesis that the world would be better if people don't eat animals, it's a wonderful thing to think, but it just doesn't always play out nutritionally. And the vegetarians have this idea, some of the old school vegetarian vegans have this idea that everyone would be better if they didn't eat fat, this kind of kindergarten nutrition idea that the fat you eat is the fat you wear, the fat you eat gets stuck in your arteries. It's just not true. In fact, the sugar you eat raises triglyceride levels, messes up your cholesterol levels, increases your chance of heart disease. Again, all of this science was really good in its time, but it's all been refuted. Nobody believes it anymore. And the low-fat, high-carb, vegetarian, vegan, plant-based community, they keep digging up this old research and publishing it, and it's really a shame. Really, nobody believes this anymore. And they're quoting studies that in their time were really highly regarded. A lot of the original publishing medical doctors and researchers have even refuted their own stuff. In terms of coconut oil, it's a wonderful saturated fat. In terms of raising your triglyceride, raising your blood pressure, all those things, I would encourage you to put it to the test. For me, it's had absolutely the opposite effect on everyone that I've seen. A higher fat, moderate protein, throttled carbohydrate diet is one of the healthiest ways to go. And all of the thought leaders in nutrition and health, doesn't matter if they're paleo or raw food or vegan or whatever, everyone's moving in that same direction. The macro conversation is interesting. The isms, the ideologies out there, that they just don't lead you the right way, unfortunately. So, like a lot of people out there, really great information from Michael Greger. I appreciate what he's doing, but unfortunately, he's got this ideology about veganism that really clouds the issue, and he doesn't really get clear. So, Go crazy with the coconut oil. I eat tons of it, feed tons of it to my kids. Really rich in lauric and caprylic acid. I'm not a huge fan of MCT oil. The jury's kind of out in terms of that processing. I'm not super comfortable with how it's processed. I have used it extensively, but I mostly just default to moderately refined coconut oil. So no chunks of coconut, but I don't like the deodorized stuff either. Second part of the question, I was really disappointed and couldn't believe that tomatoes, peppers, and goji berries can cause inflammation. What are your thoughts? Yeah, so nightshade vegetables is what Marina's referring to, and I don't think goji berries are nightshades, but your common nightshades would be bell peppers, aubergines or eggplants, depending on which country you're in, and then tomatoes. Those are the common nightshades. There's a whole bunch of other ones as well. In fact, potatoes are nightshades as well. And for some people, they react. They get arthritis-like inflammation in their joints. And a lot of people have no idea. Some people have a natural taste aversion, meaning they'll taste bell pepper is one of the bigger offenders, or aubergines, eggplants. People will taste it and they'll say, this tastes good, but for some reason I shouldn't be eating it. That's your body intuitively telling you that you're having a reaction. But for most people, there's no reaction at all. So I don't have any reaction to nightshades. I eat all of them in excess and no problems at all. So make sure that you know that it's really causing you inflammation. The other thing to think about is that every food is either yin or yang, it's a heads or a tails, and it's really a balancing act. So a little bit of inflammation, a slight inflammation from some food is not that big of a deal, and perhaps it's part of a healthy process. But if you are somebody who's suffering from joint pain, specifically wrist and hand, sort of osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis type symptoms, it's worth experimenting going 10 days nightshade free. My first suggestion would be to go 10 days grain-free, specifically wheat-free, because that's often a higher point of leverage. But for sure, think about experimenting with nightshade-free. I know very, very few people who react to nightshades. It's a lot more hype than it is reality, so make sure you test that thesis. Hope that's helpful. Marina, for those of you who have questions, email me podcast@yogabody.com.
This week's iTunes review is by Yoga Melly from the US. Yoga Melly says, as a longtime yoga teacher and practitioner, this podcast does a wonderful job of exploring topics that interest me. Although each podcast does not always relate to yoga directly, you will enjoy learning more about topics related to living a long and healthful life. If you are interested in becoming more mindful and want to deepen your curiosity about both your internal and external world, then look no further. Listen, learn, and explore. Congratulations, Yoga Melly. You have won the Yoga Trapeze. Email us at podcast@yogabody.com and we'll ship it to you.
If you like the Yoga Talk Show, you'll definitely want to get on our mailing list. Go to yogabody.com/sign me up. This is my private email list where once a week at the very most, I'll send you a quick update. This is where I send some of my insider information, some of the stuff that's not really for public consumption, but specifically for Yoga Talk Show listeners, early announcements of new courses and new products. And just for signing up, we give away a free prize. Usually we have some kind of physical gift or MP3 download, some kind of pose chart. We change it up every month. But to join the top secret list, please go to yogabody.com/sign me up. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.